Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Growth Path. Today I'm super excited to have somebody on that we've spoke with a couple of months back, actually, just after she'd sold her agency, which was super exciting news for her. And now, in the meantime, she's also become an author as well. So I'd like to welcome on Kathryn Strachan. Um, Kathryn is an award-winning fractional CMO, strategic advisor, expert speaker, author, and guest lecturer with a wealth of experience in driving growth and recognition for businesses. As I mentioned before, she was a CEO and former founder of Copyhouse, which is an agency, and she transformed the content marketing agency into a marketing leader, expanding it down to a team of 32 with a $1.5 million turnover during its peak. On top of that, Kathryn's also the host of the five-star rated podcast Tech Marketers Uncorked, and is a guest lecturer, or not anymore, has that changed?
Yeah, so sorry. Tech Marketers Uncorked was my old podcast, which got
Okay.
sold with the agency. So I have a new podcast now that I launched in January called Marketers Unleashed.
Okay. Okay. Noted, updated. Sorry, my apologies. My apologies for that. So on top of that, she has just released a book called Scaling Success, Building Brands That Break Barriers. And this is something that we're going to be focused on a bit today as well. Kathryn, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Tell me a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so my book, it's called Scaling Success, How to Build a Brand That Breaks Barriers. It kind of follows the trajectory of how I built the agency. So I built the agency from just myself to 32 people with over 1.5 million turnover in the space of like 4 years. And a lot of the clients that came to the agency were looking to do something similar in terms of brand awareness. So brand awareness is a constant problem for the companies we were working with, for us as an agency. So the book follows how you build that brand awareness. So how do you take a brand from not having much brand awareness to being a well-known name in the industry? So it covers everything from making marketing hires to setting up your website to building a personal brand and everything in between. It's packed full of really actionable insights and advice. And it really breaks things down into concepts that anybody can understand. So I've had some family and friends who are not in marketing read the book, and part of their feedback has been that they understand it. Even though they're not marketing professionals, they totally get what the book is talking about, which is one of my prides. I've always been big on taking concepts and breaking them down and making them translate to the audience in a way that the audience is going to understand. So the book is packed full of actual insights and advice on how to accelerate your marketing. And it has lots of personal stories about things that I did right and things that I did wrong and, lessons learned along the way.
Let's talk about maybe some of those lessons learned along the way. So, like, obviously, it's probably fresh in your mind because the book is right off the press, more or less. Well, I mean, you wrote it a couple of months back, I guess. But tell me about some of the mistakes that you made, maybe in building the agency, or some of the learnings that you had.
Yeah. I think a really common one is when I first hired a marketing manager, which is definitely a right move. Having a dedicated marketing person within the company is a good move. But what I did at first was I hired somebody who was really senior. So the problem with somebody who's really senior is they want to do strategy. They don't want to do, the hands-on execution. So, the first marketing hire only really lasted, 6 months or so before I needed to go and hire somebody who was a bit more mid-level, who could do that strategy, but, was also happy to do execution and get stuck in. So, that was definitely one of the lessons. Another really good lesson is, a lot of companies, when they want to build brand awareness, will immediately invest in PR. But I really think that you can't invest in PR and media outreach until you have a name that people recognize. So if you're Monzo or Revolut or Wise, you roll out a new initiative like the 4-day work week and everybody's going to cover it. It's going to be big industry news. It's going to be across all of the publications. But if you're a little company that nobody's ever heard of, you can do the exact same initiative and you won't get the same coverage. So a lot of companies, before they have brand awareness, try to invest in PR. And what ends up happening is they end up not getting the results that they want or expect. They normally take it out on the agency that they've chosen to work with, blame the company and, part ways with them and say, oh, PR doesn't work for us. Well, yeah, PR doesn't work for you because you haven't invested in your own brand first. So those are two of the lessons that like I had to learn the hard way. We did that at Coffee House. We hired a PR agency and worked with them for 5 months and didn't get the results because we hadn't invested in our own brand first. Where nowadays, even without the company anymore, if I want to get media coverage, I reach out to my network, I reach out to people who know me, and I can get that going. So it's a much different kettle of fish when you have an established name, when you have some brand equity to fall back on.
It's like a really important point. Like, I think there's so many people that like don't understand what PR is as well, right? I think I was like, I hear this quite a lot. Oh, we need to be doing more PR. Like, do you know what PR is exactly? Like, do you like but we don't want to pay an agency to do PR. I'm like, okay, well, do we have any? First of all, this is even with companies that have a brand already, right? And they have stories to tell. But it's like, okay, well, do we have relationships with the media? Well, why do we need relationships with media? We need to do press releases. I'm like, press releases, like nobody gives a shit about a press release. Like I've had this recently, where people, oh yeah, let's just do a press release. I'm like, for what? So that you and I can read it and that's about it. Maybe one other person. Like what's the point? Like you need to work together with an agency that first of all gives a shit about you, which is hard, right? To have an agency that actually truly cares for a small business. So if we're talking about a business where you're paying a monthly retainer of, let's say, a couple of grand a month to a PR agency, that could seem like a big investment to many companies. But actually, in the general scheme of things, from a PR perspective, that's actually very little. Right? You can be spending a huge amount more on that. To work with a PR agency that has the contacts from relevant tier one media and to be paying them a couple of grand a month and for them to actually give a shit about you, that's like really hard to find, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that your money's probably better spent elsewhere. I mean, if I only had a 2 grand a month budget, I probably invested in building the founder or CEO's personal brand. By building their personal brand, not only are you gonna attract media coverage and opportunities, but you're also going to attract new clients. It's going to help you with your recruitment and your retention. Like, there's a lot more benefits beyond just the media coverage. So if I had a really limited budget, I wouldn't spend it on PR.
I think I'm seeing, so actually, Andy from a year ago would have fully agreed with that. I agree with it to a certain extent. Like, I do think, like, okay, there's obviously, like, I fully invest in making sure that the founders have their own personal brand built. Like, I think that's a no brainer, right? I have had experience as of late working with PR agencies in Europe. Now, this is different to the US. The US is, when it comes to PR agencies, tends to be much more expensive. But in bigger markets in Europe, for example, in Germany, I've been working with one PR agency in particular, which is not like really breaking the bank by any means. It's that couple of grand a month sort of retainer, 3 or 4K a month. I think it's 3K a month is what we're spending. But we're managing to get monthly coverage in tier one media in Germany, which is a huge market. So Germany is whatever 70 million people, So it's a big market in Europe, right? I think it's a different story if you're attacking the US market. So I'll add a little caveat to it, to what you said. I fully agree with the building the personal brand thing on the PR. A year ago, I would have said forget PR. But now, after the experience I'm having, especially if you're going after local markets, it's maybe not the worst idea to explore it. But you need to make sure that you're working with an agency that has the connections with local media, like, and that they give a shit. That's hard. Like, I don't know how to quantify that. I don't know how to have the checklist beforehand to make sure that they're going to care about you. That's the thing. I reckon you need to have a contact in there. It's probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, or have a way to make them look good. So, I mean, if you can really help support their marketing efforts. So, a lot of clients in an agency don't necessarily want to do case studies, or even getting a quota out of them can be an uphill slog. So if you are a small brand and you don't have a massive budget, so you're not going to be one of their biggest spenders, the other way to really like make them care about you is to make them look good, to help them with their marketing efforts, to promote them, to show up to their events, to invest in that relationship.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Let's take a different track just on the book as well. Like, what was the hardest part for you about writing a book? Because you're not so. I mean, I don't know if you've considered yourself before as an author.
Well, I guess I'm an author now.
You are now, but before it was new territory for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never written a book before, but I am a writer. I've been writing my whole entire life. I used to write children's stories for my dad when I was a little kid, and I have 2 degrees in English literature, so books are always my thing. I started my marketing career as a copywriter, so I was a copywriter. I mean, I found the writing part of the book really easy. I mean, it was easier than writing my dissertation. When I wrote my dissertation, I didn't know what I was talking about. So I was having to do a lot of research, analysis, and really trying to figure out what my angle was with the book because I do so much public speaking already, because I have such a strong personal brand. A lot of the stories, I had told before in a different shape or format. So I just needed to pull it all together and to create that red thread that ran throughout. So, I mean, I wrote it in about 2 months. About a year ago, I sat down in January and February, and that week right between Christmas and New Year, when like everything stops, when you've got that like standstill because nobody's working, everything's dead quiet. I like hit the ground running really hard. So I wrote the book in about 2 months and it fell out of me in a lot of ways. I found the harder part, the production process. So after I wrote it, edited, I have a publisher, multiple versions of the cover, proofreading and small little tiny details, like all the production stuff that goes into producing a book, took about a year. So, I mean, after the book was actually written, there's a whole chunk of work that has to happen in order for it to become a book. And, that part was infuriating, frustrating, and took so long, even though like the time it took was actually pretty standard in how long it should take. So, I mean, it wasn't like my publisher dropped the ball or like being a bad publisher or anything like that. But it took a really long time to actually produce a book. I got them in the mail the other day, actually last week.
I seen it on LinkedIn, yeah. Seen it on
Yeah,
LinkedIn with
I
your
mean,
daughter, yeah.
opening that box and feeling the book in my hands, especially as a marketer, a lot of the work that we do is digital, it's not something that you can hold. So being able to like actually hold a copy of my book in my hands was a massively proud moment, probably one of my career highlights.
I, I can only imagine how that feels. It's like I would say on the bucket list for me to do something similar at some point, but I actually just need to find the time to bloody well do it. But but it's amazing. Like so you said you took 2 months to sit down and write it, but it sort of fell out of you. It wasn't necessarily a struggle at all to get the words down onto paper, right?
No, no. I mean, I had a goal of writing 2,000 words every single day. Before I started writing, I sat down with the publisher and created an outline. So I knew my direction to travel. For anybody who is thinking about writing a book, having an outline is incredibly important. It's going to keep you on track. It's going to stop you from going off on tangents, and you're going to be able to measure how close you are to the end. So it's like having a roadmap. If you want to drive from Edinburgh to London, you need to know how you're going to get there. And that outline helps show you where the turns are going to be, what roads you need to take. It helps you to map that all out. So having that outline was pretty essential. And once I had that outline, I knew that I had my narrative thread, my narrative structure, and then all I had to do was fill in the blanks. An outline's a bit like, well, it's an outline, it's in its name, but it's a bit like having a coloring page. You've got the outline there, you've got the picture, you then just need to take the colors and bring it to life.
Were there any surprises?
I think how hard it was to like deviate from the outline. So once I had the outline, once I had it locked into my head, as I was writing, sometimes there'd be like an idea of, oh, maybe I should add this. And then I try to add that and be like, oh wait, no, that doesn't work. So I didn't realize when I made the outline that like I was mentally gonna get so kind of stuck to it. I mean, it ended up working in my favor, but I didn't realize like how much my brain would attach itself to that outline and how hard it would be to deviate if I wanted to add something new. So I mean, the final book ended up being almost exactly what the outline had outlined, without any new chapters and tangents. But I guess it was designed that way.
Yeah, that sounds like a surprise to me though as well, to be honest with you. Like if you set something out and like You used the roadmap analogy before, being like, okay, if I want to get from point A to point B, then I need to have a map to get there. But sometimes you might end up exploring a couple of different areas along the way. But it sounds as though you managed it. Like, I'm surprised that you managed to keep directly to the same outline that you produced at the beginning. Or did it sort of go on tangents at certain points and then you brought yourself back in because of it? Or did you just stick to it?
Well, because the tangents didn't work, would take me off track. So, I mean, if you're trying to get from Edinburgh to London, you don't want to necessarily navigate all the way over to Leeds or something. It's going to take you off course and disrupt that narrative journey. So, I would try to write tangents sometimes because I'd have an idea that I thought might fit, and it almost never actually fit. So I'd end up like deleting that whole chapter, putting it in my scrap pile. Anytime I write something, I keep a separate document that I call my scrap pile. And, if I write something and then want to remove it, I put it in the scrap pile in case I ever want to bring it back in or want to refer back to it. So it's not, totally deleted. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the tangents ended up in the scrap pile because they were, in fact, tangents.
Super interesting. All right, like let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. So, like you've now got the book out. Obviously, you're trying to promote the book. What else are you doing on top of being an author and trying to sell books?
Yeah. So I have the book that I'm promoting. I mean, the book is part of building my personal brand. But alongside that, I also have my podcast called Marketers Unleashed. New episodes come out every single Monday. Check it out on Spotify. I'm doing a lot of speaking and events, which is a big part of why I wrote the book, actually, was to get onto more conferences and speaking engagements. I also act as a fractional CMO, so I represent brands and helping them to build their marketing strategies. And then I have a 7-year-old daughter who is the light of my life, and I get to do her school runs every single day, which is pretty awesome.
The thing is, I guess the years of having an agency probably were not the easiest as well. So an agency, a successful agency as well with 32 people, that's quite a
Yeah.
time suck for you, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, and I was pretty burnt out by the time that it came to close. So I mean, I am still recovering from that burnout. On a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of burnout, I was probably a 12 at the time I exited. So I mean, now I'm probably about a 7, but I still have some work to do. So I'm trying to not work all of the time and really put a cap and a limit on how much I work each week because I need to be able to recover from burnout before I can really go hard again.
So, what do you think led to that burnout? Was it just too much? Everything? Were you just working too many hours? Like, what do you think led to it?
All of the above, yeah. I mean, working too many hours. I was working probably 80, 90 hours a week for a couple of years there, not taking care of myself, which often happens if you're working too much. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not giving yourself time to rest and recharge and recover. Ignoring the early signs of burnout. I mean, I didn't sleep for about 2 years and had a perpetual eye twitch that never went away. Had a lot of things that I wasn't picking up on, which I really should have picked up on, should have listened to myself earlier on, and I would have been on a quicker route to recovery. So I mean, all of that. I used to think that you couldn't burn out. I mean, I've always been a high achiever. I've always done 10 bajillion things at once. So I didn't think that I could burn out. I thought I was immune to it, and I had to learn the hard way that nobody is immune to burnout. Even if you're a high achiever and even if you really like to have a full plate, you will burn out if you don't take care of yourself. Hello.
I'm very sorry about that. I,
I was
I don't know
wondering what
what
happened.
happened. Somebody called me on Slack and it disconnected my internet for some reason. So I can blame Slack for that. But we were right in the middle. We can connect it back up again. We can join the dots. We'll enable it. But my apologies. So we were talking about burnout, and you were just mentioning that you had a perpetual eye twitch for a year and you didn't sleep for two. So that's
Yeah,
that's where we're at.
pretty much. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I had some really early signs and didn't listen to them. I was working far too many hours. I wasn't taking care of myself. And, even for somebody who is a high achiever and has been their whole entire lives, you will burn out. I did burn out, and, to the point that I didn't even realize how bad it was when it was really bad. I almost lost my marriage. It took a year and a half of marriage counseling to get it back into a good place. I definitely missed a lot of milestones with my daughter. And now I'm just trying to make up for some lost time.
That's good. It's good that you're managing to put things back on track again. It's like spoken to a couple of people on this show about burnout as well. It's like it's such a common thing, especially if you're working in tech. I guess you were working with tech customers as well. It's like it's so regular. Like I know plenty of people it's happened to. It's like it's not something that just happens to people. Oh, somebody very far away or whatever. It's like it's such a common thing actually. I mean, you're not careful about it, especially nowadays because we're so easily accessible all of the time that it's just like we're training ourselves almost to work around the clock, right? If you don't stop it, like if you don't put an end, like if you don't create a boundary, then it can be very quickly very dangerous, right?
Yeah, and I mean the only person who can put those boundaries in place is you. The company, a company that you work for, whether you own it or you work for them, you cannot like they won't take care of you the way that you need to take care of yourself. It's ultimately your responsibility to turn off your notifications, to not have your work email on your phone, all these things. You can manage a team, you can tell them, don't answer Slack in the evenings, turn off your emails, but until you actually do it, you won't make a difference. So, I mean, companies can't really be responsible for preventing burnout. I mean, there's different cultures that encourage it for sure. But at the end of the day, like you as an individual need to take care of yourself first and foremost.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Well, hey, look, we're just up on time now. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Kathryn. Where can people find you and where can people find out more about the book?
Yeah, so connect with me on LinkedIn or buy the book on Amazon. I have a big goal of hitting 1,000 purchases, and yeah, I am almost a quarter of the way there, and it's only been out for a month. So go buy it on Amazon.
Nice. Nice. Super. Thanks a million for that, Kathryn. I'll make sure that all the links to those, your LinkedIn as well as the book are on Amazon is shared in the description of this episode as well. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, this has been another episode of Growth Path. Tune in again next week for more content. Kathryn, thanks again.
No worries.